Hello everyone. Today I have the honor and great pleasure of speaking with two eminent people from Switzerland. Once Christian Oesch, a native Swiss, the president of the Swiss Association WIR, who has been advocating for years to ensure that yes, Switzerland remains democratic and above all, yes, does not become a research laboratory for the WHO, among others. And then I have as a second guest here Stefan Hockertz, Professor Dr. Med, a recognized toxicologist and immunologist who, yes, came to Switzerland by a roundabout way and feels at home there and shares the same ambitions as Christian, namely that Switzerland does not become a research laboratory, especially for the WHO in Spiez, or Spiez, as Spiez, I believe, pronounce it correctly, as the Swiss say. Near Lake Thun, gain-of-function research is being conducted. You found that out. We have already reported on this on my channel. We will briefly show it here. There is already a very interesting video from you, or rather from you, Christian. And now you have taken another action to draw attention to this problem. And I heard about it and thought I must support you. So I'm giving you the stage now. Yeah, what's happening right now? How do you intend to stop these WHO activities, so to speak?
Yes, thank you in advance, dear Michael, for the invitation here. And I am really looking forward to our exchange and the conversation. Yes, what exactly is happening? So for quite some time, we have put our finger on the wound here with the Spiez laboratory in coordination with the World Health Organization. This goes back to 2021, when we found out that the Spiez laboratory, the Bioweapons system laboratory, is becoming BSL-4, the highest possible security level, together with the WHO. And that is something that, yes, went on ice and then resurfaced again at the end of 24 when we received additional information about it, especially in coordination with the Convergence Convention, which met twice back in 2024. And I was then yes, in coordination with Dr. Nehls. She is a colleague of mine. We have known each other for several years. And we then looked into the topic of the Spiez laboratory together, exchanged ideas, and also coordinated some actions together. I then also had the opportunity through Children's Health Defense, which is a TV, it's an online platform. It's actually the foundation that Robert F. Kennedy founded. And Dr. Nehls is a very close scientist friend who uncovered the anthrax situation in the United States back in 2001. So she specializes in bioweapons development and is really, really knowledgeable in that area. So this activity, WHO and Spiez laboratory, also put her on alert. And then we had the opportunity to exchange some things in our interview. And the interview went really viral worldwide. And then we pursued it more deeply. And in the meantime, I had the opportunity to assemble a great team to research the Spiez laboratory more thoroughly here, actually on site in Switzerland. And we had already, with various actions here, yes, at least tried to initiate some things. So including parliamentary representatives in the National Council and Council of States, asked some questions to the Federal Council, and we are not getting any answers. So, well, I think we've stumbled upon something really, really hot. And yes, I am really... Yes, I'm a bit excited to talk about it here. So I look forward to the exchange, and I couldn't imagine anyone better to discuss this topic with you both, especially with Professor Hockertz. And I would like to give the floor to you now, Stefan.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to have this conversation. I would like to delve a little deeper into what Christian Oesch just said. The WIO laboratory in Spiez has a history. The laboratory is quite old. That is also going to be rebuilt soon. We also know where we have conducted intensive research, including with local residents who have taken many photos and written a great book about it. We might show it later, the book by Peter Eberhard, where he described it very precisely. How do we currently come back to this topic? Well, we've been on this for a long time. We observe the activities of this laboratory. I also know this laboratory from my own previous activities. The Fraunhofer Society in Germany indeed has contacts, worldwide contacts, maintains them. And there's this Spiez laboratory, which does excellent work, right? Scientifically speaking, it's quite fascinating what's happening there. BSL-4, those are the largest, the most difficult, the most dangerous pathogens that are being worked with. And knock on wood, so far, no epidemic has broken out here in the area, which is less than 20 or 30 kilometers away from us. We have to be grateful for that. So why is this relevant again now? I need to elaborate a bit. In May of last year, Donald Trump, after all, the President of the United States signed a directive, as always, you know, so that he makes it public and then also holds it up to the camera. And this directive prohibits gain-of-function research and the so-called dual-use research. Gain-of-function meaning the enhancement of biological properties of a pathogen, and always in the direction, quite obviously always in the direction to specify and alter these properties so that it becomes more dangerous, that it becomes more infectious. So relatively simple or less pathogenic viruses, for example, like a coronavirus, it must be said, can be made into dangerous viruses if changes are made by human hands. So new genes are implanted. And Michael, you know, we both have already researched this topic quite a bit and have been able to prove that this is the case. So in May of last year, Trump signed a paper, a condemnation of gain-of-function research. At the same time, he withdraws from the WHO, well, not him, but the USA, and thus takes away one of the WHO's largest financial supporters. The United States was, alongside Bill and Melinda Gates, one of the largest supporters of the WHO. This is a concerted action, on one side saying no more gain-of-function research, no more dual-use research, and on the other side also out of the WHO. When you look at what is happening in Spiez, it does make you take notice, and you say, dear Mr. Trump, why don't you come visit us? Come visit Spiez. Take a look at what is happening there with your support, of course. Right? There are companies with an American background involved that are quite obviously looking for a field, an environment, a state where they can still do what you, Trump, want to ban in your country and actually worldwide. So that was one point, and then something happened that totally surprised me. There are rarely things in politics that surprise me, but this did. Robert Kennedy wrote a letter last week to none other than the, oh, did I say that? Yes, to none other than the Federal Minister of Health in Germany. The lady's name is Walken. Honestly, I almost didn't know until today. But she is in the direct succession of Mr. Spahn. And this Lautermann-Bach, yes, that's his name, Lauterbach. So, she is essentially the direct successor, the current German health minister. And there, Kennedy writes, I'll summarize it very, very briefly. I don't want to bore you. There, Kennedy writes about how you in Germany, not Europe, have dealt and are dealing with critics of the corona scene. How you deal with doctors who have issued mask exemptions on their own responsibility. How you deal with doctors and scientists who have warned about this vaccination, in quotes, right? Genes therapy, corona shots, that is beyond any human rights. He chooses very, very sharp words, and that surprised and pleased me. Many who get to know me or know me are aware that I belong exactly to this group. And many friends have already told me, hey, now you have a great partner, Robert F. Kennedy, the health minister of the United States, supporting you like that. To some extent, that's true. And that was for us now, Christian and me, because we work closely together on many points. I support him sometimes in the background, sometimes being involved. It was the occasion for us to draft a letter where we connect these two things, right? On the one hand, we say that, dear Kennedy, dear Trump, what is happening here in Spiez, which we are aware of, what is being expanded, newly built, reinforced, does not correspond to your guidelines, does not meet your wishes. And we also asked the Federal Council, of course, who bears the responsibility here? Who is legally responsible here? Is there approval from the sovereign we live all around here for what you are doing there? It's not entirely without risk, we must say. And to what extent is cooperation between Switzerland and the WHO still relevant when the USA, which we in Switzerland always look up to, right? We always look up to them, right? You do not look at eye level, but we always look up and then naturally ask, why don't you also withdraw Switzerland from the WHO, just like the USA did, consistently prohibit dual use and gain of function research, and thereby make the laboratory in Spiez, I don't want to say close it, but at least reduce their activities in that direction. And the other thing we associated with it, that's more my own cause. I still want to say that I, of course, Kennedy say, if you, Robert, I was able to meet him personally when he was here. If you, Robert, stand up for those persecuted in Germany by the Corona regime, then I just tell you, here is one. You know, I have had my house searched, I have been dispossessed, I have been crushed with a political process. And then you have an example here. So these are the things as we have touched upon. And one thing concerns me personally. Okay, I don't want to push that to the forefront now. And the other is about gain of function research on Swiss soil. I think it's extremely important that we talk about it.
Yes, but the main intention is definitely that the diplomatic immunity granted by Switzerland to the WHO, and every diplomatic passport holder knows they can smuggle whatever they want across the border and it cannot be inspected. And that is exactly the problem in Spiez, that no one is allowed to look inside. That means research can be conducted there in all directions, and it is a level 4 laboratory, which is the maximum security level for highly pathogenic germs. Can one imagine, well, what happens there? Among other things, when you see that the WHO is nothing more than a non-governmental organization, an NGO that generates enormous funds for the pharmaceutical industry through such released viruses. However, they come to see the light of day, so to speak. And they even have a concept that promises at least a 35 times return on investment from pandemics to anyone who invests in the World Health Organization over the next 10 years. And that is practically already a guarantee that there will be pandemics. And according to this concept, one should be able to foresee these pandemics. If you already know what pandemics could come, meaning you have a range and know which vaccines will likely need to be developed, you can possibly pre-produce them. And of course, you cannot do that if the virus comes from nature. It would be completely impossible to make a prediction there, but you know very well what is being produced in certain laboratories. And that is why the whole situation in the context of Corona and COVID, which we have experienced, is so incredibly dangerous and difficult and necessary to take action against it. That's why I am very, very glad that you both initiated this and are making waves in the United States. I mean, we also know, on the other hand, what the German government, the current one, thinks of the Americans, because they are doing exactly the opposite of what should actually be done. I am myself in the inquiry commission and see how they are preparing the next pandemic there, serving the WHO, wanting to create the legal framework so that everything runs even more efficiently and more of such diseases can be profitable. The question now is, of course, what do you hope to achieve from this? Do you have hope that the German government will actually back down if Trump speaks a decisive word, or will there be other channels? So not the German government. In this case, it would be Switzerland. Sorry, the Swiss government will actually respond to it. What do you think?
Well, first of all, of course, the question is, will the Americans react?
Yes, that is a very interesting question. We have already been asked that, and since our publication of these letters, there is a letter directly to Donald Trump, there is a letter to Robert F. Kennedy, and then there is a letter to the Federal Council in Switzerland, that is the Bundesrat. We strategically aligned this also in relation to our colleague Dr. Meryl Nehls, and it came about, so to speak, through her idea to do this. Do we have the possibility, through the fact that Dr. Meryl Nehls is the right hand as a highly trusted scientist of Robert F. Kennedy? She is not on the team at the moment, so he is the top in health department for the USA, Robert F. Kennedy. And so there is a personal relationship, a trusted relationship that allows us to ensure he really receives this letter, but then also to Jay Bhattacharya. He is there, the chief, now the director of the National Health Institute. So he is responsible for the gain of function, and she also has direct access to his desk, so to speak. So Stefan and I have already discussed it, and without the chance that these letters would actually arrive, we probably wouldn't have taken the time. So from that perspective, I do think that Trump will also hear what's going on when Robert F. Kennedy says, hey, wait a minute, next week is the WEF in Davos. Maybe you have the chance to share something about Switzerland. I have no idea. And the interesting thing is he divided? These are people who are for Trump and these are people who are against him. At the moment, everything is upside down and I am always being approached. Also, what are you doing with the USA? Why do you still have trust in Trump? Blah, blah, blah. So maybe here, my orientation is if anyone has the chance to process, research, and compile our messages that we put together here. But to publish, then we go with that. Sorry. So for us, it is certainly important that if we have the chance, really in the head of the American government, now very active worldwide. Of course, no one overlooks that, and we have the chance to place to publish our situation. Then we seize this opportunity. What exactly will happen here, Michael? We do not know. We are also very curious. But as you mentioned, Stefan, the USA will withdraw from the WHO starting on the 20th. That is almost 1 billion in donations to the WHO that will be lost. And the interesting thing is how the whole situation is behaving now. And we have already pursued this a bit deeper. And I think here strategically for the USA in direct competition with China with bioweapons development, dual gain of function, the dual use gain of function, bioweapons, that is quite specific. I don't think the USA is very motivated to watch as the Chinese now donate additional funds to the WHO, so to fill the gap for the USA. And then with the leverage, so to speak, beam up that they have even more pressure now to coordinate these bioweapons through the WHO, through Switzerland Bio, or the lab, and then distribute them worldwide through the PABS, that is the Pathogens Access Benefit Sharing, and so on. That's pretty crazy. So I do think that we have a good chance there, if not from Trump. I don't think Trump himself, but Jay Bhattacharya, who is now responsible for the gain of function in the USA, and we'll take that chance. But what do you say, Stefan?
Yes, about Jay, perhaps. Jay is the author of the Great Brexit Declaration. So someone who very early during the Corona time placed value on human dignity. Again, we pushed this forward here in Germany back then. The right people are already in the right positions. That is one gift. That is a real gift, which we in Germany and also in Switzerland, by the way, can absolutely dream of, that such people come into positions. I originally wrote my letter to Robert Malone. I know Robert relatively well. We have had good contact with each other repeatedly in the past, and Robert Malone is now also in a governmental position, as he is in the Vaccination Commission, essentially the American STIKO, working in the Vaccination Commission of the USA. So again, someone who is close to Kennedy, right? One deals with the topic of vaccinations, and I originally wrote this letter to Robert, which we then forwarded one-to-one, to Trump and Kennedy. What do I hope to achieve from what we are doing there? I am a guest here in this country. I must always say I am a guest in Switzerland, and I am grateful that I have been welcomed here and I'm allowed to live here. There is absolutely nothing wrong with a laboratory in Spiez that conducts biological research. Yes, I used to do that myself. These are activities that I would say are partly possibly for the protection of the population, because it is legally subordinated to civil protection as a laboratory. So it is not military, but subordinated to civil protection. There is absolutely nothing to object to. There is also nothing wrong with conducting biological research to see, as Switzerland, what we can achieve, what we can do. What I am extremely against is that the person in charge, and we would like to hear this from the Federal Council, is not the Federal Council or the sovereign of Switzerland in Spiez, but the World Health Organization.
So that gives me extreme stomach pains.
I get extreme stomach pains when a company, Michael, you mentioned it earlier, when a company driven by donations which are earmarked by a Gates from a criminal, I say it quite openly. This Debriezes, or whatever the man's name is led by someone who has driven the genocide in Ethiopia. If such people have access to such a laboratory with the expertise, which is high in Spiez, yes, the expertise of these people there, the scientists, is very high, then I would say Switzerland, the Federal Council, should be careful who is in charge there. And it's not just the WHO, but let's call them by name. It's the colleagues from Rheinmetall who go in and out there. Yes, I mean, the access is public, right? And that colleague from the Simmental I mentioned earlier, who has been deeply involved, knows exactly who goes in and out, right? He also sees the pharmaceutical companies that come and go. And then, of course, one wonders in whose hands is this, yes, satanic danger. And it is satanic to me when gain of function is done here by people who firstly have not been elected by the sovereign. Yes, where we as the sovereign could have said, you are allowed to do this or not, where the sovereign was not asked, and pursue goals, as we have seen with Corona, that are not honest.
The letters, they can be made public. They are, well, we can also attach them to this conversation, I would say.
Yes, absolutely.
I would claim that now. So
yes,
when that means the sovereign can already see them. Yes, that is already very important. And I do believe, well, I have great hope. Otherwise, I wouldn't be having this conversation. I have great hope that something will come back from the USA. We will follow Trump's speech at the BEF. But something can happen because this is about pandemics. And pandemics, of course, have the characteristic that they do not, spare the American states. Yes, so this is about make America healthy again and not sick again. Yes, sick again in this case. So I can well imagine that American health policy is indeed about preventing the next pandemic. Exactly what I am trying in vain to show in the inquiry, namely where the last pandemic came from. well, I was able to hint at it a little, but we know where the pandemic came from and where it came from. There are more pandemics, and the question is, if one truly has the mandate to prevent pandemics, then one must combat the origin, act causally. I have little fear of viruses that come from nature, I must say.
And now we are already at another topic, which fits quite well for me.
Namely the question that is repeatedly brought to me, which is why I even speak so publicly about gain-of-function research. By doing so, I would scare people, is one argument. And fear was exactly what drove people to the injection, what ensured that people underwent the gene therapy. That means it would even be serving this power, so to speak, is implied by that. And the second argument related to this is that real pandemics can actually only come from weak viruses, because strong viruses would kill people immediately and thus quickly cause high lethality, leaving them with little chance to spread. That means gain-of-function research, in fact, for these people who keep approaching me, is not dangerous at all. What is your opinion on this?
Maybe I can address this sentence you just said, and it is indeed correct. Real pandemics, those that affect the entire world, can only be triggered by relatively weakly pathogenic germs. Highly pathogenic germs, we have to consider whether bacteria or viruses. If the host dies, the germ dies with him, it is dead too. If the host becomes seriously ill, he automatically withdraws. Yes, we don't need curfews for that. I lie in bed, yes. And so I can't infect other people as much. That means a real pandemic, and we have seen this with corona, right? A real pandemic is actually only caused by weakly pathogenic germs. And then it quickly leads to widespread infection. And then suddenly they are endemic pathogens, right? They are no longer pandemic, they are endemic. Endemic means we live with them, we can manage with them. We don't need to do anything against them. But now comes exactly the point. So you are right, Michael, when you say that, or when you are accused of that. Gain of function exploits something where I would say nature has actually put a stop. In nature, for example, highly pathogenic germs trigger the Marburg virus or Ebola. We will never have a pandemic because there is a lot die too quickly. But if I now alter the germ or the virus in such a way that, for example, I have a very long latency period, yes, if I now have a very long incubation phase and only then let people die after 4 or 5 years, we see now, right, with the spike protein. Now it's starting. Not immediately. Those who collapsed right after these vaccinations, that was an accident, yes. That shouldn't have happened. The late effects are what's interesting. And then we talk about gain of function, specifically the enhancement of an actually highly dangerous germ or a highly dangerous toxin, yes. We want to talk here about the...
Do not talk about the pre-splitting point, but that is exactly what...
Yes. That I make it sharp. Yes. Make a weapon ready to fire so that it can take effect much later. And when it takes effect later, by the way, that's what these politicians worked with. They worked with the concept that someone is sick without being sick. That's why they'd locked everyone away. They knew exactly what they were doing because they knew it was a bioweapon that would only take effect much later. And we see that with this vaccination. So the vaccination is actually the bioweapon for me because it has long-term effects. And that's why gain of function is so dangerous, because it interferes with the nature of a natural process that couldn't actually happen like that.
I just want to mention here in our conversations, Stefan and he taught me something, and I think it's very important for everyone to think about that. Stefan taught me that bioweapons are always offensive and never thought of defensively. Okay, so maybe, Stefan, you could add something here, but that's so deeply ingrained in my brain. So from then on, I looked at it quite differently. Stefan, maybe an addition here.
Yes. That ultimately corresponds to the fact that there is a biological weapons convention. And this biological weapons convention has been signed by Germany and I think also by Switzerland, though I'm not entirely sure. And ultimately, Trump is doing nothing other than wanting to ban gain-of-function research, implementing this bioweapon convention, again with an order from the Mufti that he issued there in May. Correct? Bioweapons are always offensive weapons. They can never be used for defense. In any case, it has never made sense to me that it could be like that. However, if we are talking about these labs working on bioweapons intended for offensive purposes, then we are very close to discussing whether that is not a crime against humanity. So, these are things we simply need to get into our heads and should also get into people's heads. Something is being worked on here that is meant to destroy you and cannot protect you. That cannot work. And that's why, for me, this very intelligent gain-of-function research, which exactly twists nature, Michael, that's it, and I believe that hasn't come out in your discussions yet. I also know what you're referring to. It twists nature. It alters natural sequences, and that makes it so dangerous.
Exactly. So that's also what I counter to the critics. The problem is, you have to understand the intention of those conducting this research. And when there are people involved, like Gates, who, in my opinion, show a great interest in achieving population reduction, then of course a pandemic weapon must be one that has a delayed effect, and one can relatively easily imagine that something is simply incorporated I don't know, an SV40 promoter, which is now a contamination in the vaccines, in the so-called vaccines, and poses a cancer risk. And if I only have an increased cancer risk at some point due to something cloned with a delay, then I have achieved exactly that, or that I change the fertility of people. For the virus and the pandemic, it doesn't matter if fertility is reduced at first, yes, because the host continues to live and spread the virus. Well, if I were a very evil person, I could think of many ways to achieve population reduction with a pandemic weapon without people immediately dropping dead ad hoc. So you can get very creative, and you mentioned earlier that the people in Spiez, for example, are top experts and certainly equipped with a lot of creativity. Not that I want to accuse anyone working there, but I know, or rather I strongly suspect, that people like Gates and others who already say with the climate problem that humans are the problem and we need to reduce them, that there can naturally be intentions that are dangerous for us as humanity. And that's why, in my opinion, I completely agree with you, crimes against humanity, even to consider this type of research.
Yes, maybe I can briefly illustrate this for the people listening to us. In the eyes of Gates and his backers, we are rats. And if I develop a rat poison, as we have learned, it must act slowly. I said this 3 years ago in a program back then on Radio Munich. It must be a slow-acting poison. Why must it act slowly? First, first, the rat must not be able or need to inform its fellow sufferers, its fellow rats, where it got the poison from or how the poison was ingested. There must be no conclusions drawn. And that is exactly what characterizes this bioweapon or the other gain-of-function weapons, that it is very, very difficult for us to establish a causal connection between the death and the cause. I am a toxicologist by profession. This makes it very problematic to actually establish a causal connection here, and that is exactly why they consider us like rats. People, these people up there pulling the strings, think of us as rats that need to be slowly poisoned so we don't even notice, with many other mechanisms. Christian can say more about that in a moment. That would go too far now. All that happened, 20,000. Right, Christian? are all topics that belong to it. And that makes gain of function so incredibly dangerous, because they are slowly acting poisons where we no longer have access, or where it is very difficult with a lot of effort to establish a causal link between death, but not only death, also the reduction of birth rates and severe suffering, and the cause.
Yes, absolutely. And I think we already mentioned it once. So people talk about side effects, but we speak about the actual effect of the gene injection. So we are dealing with fertility problems, we are dealing with premature death and stillbirths, we are dealing with pregnancy problems. So we are being attacked from all areas. Autoimmune diseases, turbo cancer, and so on. We are seeing this everywhere now. Very young people are dying everywhere. Simply insane what's going on there. So in that regard, we also have very good studies and statistics. Konstantin Beck, right, Stefan, is doing really, really great work in Switzerland. And we are truly following what is happening there. And I think that's important. Also, you, with your work, Michael, or the Commission of Inquiry, and we here in Switzerland together, with citizen inquiries, we have the entire RKI documentation. We took apart the whole package with the COVID fact check here in Switzerland last year as a project. So the evidence, facts, and sources that exist, it's all just political, and it's not an easy fight. We are dealing with politicized science, and you know that best, Michael, and you too, Stefan, with what we are actually dealing with. But our campaign together here is also really to raise global awareness about this topic. And yes, I know that with the conversation, with the dialogue with our national parliamentarians, they have absolutely no idea. So no one in the national parliament has any idea what's going on, what gain of function is. Not at all about dual use, or whether dual use can be applied in a medical, civilian, or even military sense. That's really extreme. And here in Spiez, we are dealing with a competence cluster. It's not just the biolab. Stefan, you mentioned it. We have Rheinmetall, the largest arms company here in Europe, present 300 meters away from the Spiez lab. The nitrochemie and their explosives and all that stuff, the explosives, propellants, you have everything side by side. And then we also have in Ochsenboden, in the canton of Schwyz, under the mountains, we have another subsidiary of Rheinmetall as a testing ground for trials. And yes, it's incredible that we have these activities in neutral Switzerland. That's just sheer madness. And the political, yes, our politicians, they simply have no idea. They receive stacks of mail every day. They can't even prioritize what's going on. That's why we try to raise awareness. And I think that our federal council is being coerced and blackmailed into just letting this happen. Last year, the federal council proudly handed over an office to NATO in Geneva, so NATO is now right across from the WHO. So, and we know that biological weapons are the best, actually the best and the most effective, is essentially a military strategy. So one by one, with each jab, with each injection, you can really administer it. So it is the cheapest and most efficient bioweapon, so to speak, from the traditional conventional war strategy. Is the use of bioweapons actually the best strategically? And maybe, Stefan, you could add here, because you and I have discussed this in detail.
We have talked about chemical weapons for a long time. We all remember Libya, where chemical weapons were supposed to be used. There is an inner logic that the inner logic is that I can only produce a chemical weapon with great difficulty, but it is very easy to deploy, right? So it flies over with an airplane, or I have some cannon with which I can shoot it. Weapons always have the characteristic that they must be targeted. Right, therefore I want to harm the opponent, so to speak, and not myself. That is a very, very important point. And with biological weapons, it has always been exactly the opposite. They were relatively easy to produce. I can do that at home in a pot if necessary. So, even in molecular biology, I don't want to offend, but these are relatively simple procedures that I can do in the lab, but they have been difficult to deploy so far. The targeted deployment of a bioweapon was incredibly difficult because, as you rightly say, viruses don't stop at borders. Yes, they are also active after 10 p.m. Very, very difficult. Very difficult. They also cannot be stopped by an FFP2 mask. No, they cannot. So that makes bioweapons easy to produce but difficult to deploy. And that has shown us over the last 4 years, I must say, that if we turn people's minds around, and that's the real idea behind it now, they administer this weapon to themselves. Then I've won again, because then it is easy to distribute. Then I simply put a syringe in people's hands, or I tell the doctors, like now in Germany, if you don't perform 20 vaccinations per week, then you lose part of your reimbursement options. Yes, there are mechanisms at work in the background at the moment that people don't even notice. And then deploying this bioweapon is again easy. And then, as Christian rightly says, it is unfortunately the most satanic of all weapons. I don't want to say the optimal weapon because that puts it in the wrong overall context, but for me it is the most satanic of all weapons. And yes, we simply have to say that under the leadership of private organizations, people are working on these topics here in Spiez, and that worries me greatly.
If they were working under the supervision of a state, the sovereign of the Federal Council, I would say, well, does it have to be? But at least there is some control. Here there is zero control. The WRO is not controlled. It controls itself. And with that, I'm putting the fox in charge of the hen house. And Rheinmetall and Gates are also not controlled. So that makes it so dangerous, and that's why we have to put our finger on the wound and keep telling people this over and over again, and of course try, as was the beginning of our conversation. We have to try to get a country like the USA, which apparently wants to distance itself from this, on our side.
Yes, perhaps to add here, we are also talking about the possible third-party funds available so that the Spiez laboratory is not only financed by the budget of the Swiss military, that is, by the federal government, but that it is actually much more standalone through third-party funds. So through third parties, such as possibly through NATO, but also Gavi or the WHO and their private donors in the background. That is extremely dangerous. And we are really putting pressure here in Switzerland through our lab team, also with representation in Parliament, National Council. And the fact that we are not getting answers anywhere shows us that we are onto something very, very hot here. No one discusses this. She narrative with us, they attack us personally, and it's always the same.
Yes, I have to say,
what might still need to be added about this satanic weapon is that the person who administers it to themselves even pays for it. That's the crazy part about the whole story. As a son, an unbelievable amount of money is being made from it. And yes, I have to accept the criticism that people will say, okay, now another weapon is being released, essentially the pathogen. Es ist ein Designfixer. And then afterward, only the vaccination remains out of fear. But as I said, I do believe that a globally pandemic acting weapon can really only be created with a delay effect. If that is indeed the case, one must consider how to protect oneself from it. That will be the next topic. I believe that would exceed the scope of our conversation if we have to think about what might come and how we should respond, how to inform the public about it. What I do know, however, about what has happened in the last 5 or 6 years is that, for example, the three of us are connected. And we are connected for exactly that reason. It wouldn't have happened otherwise. And we are connected with hundreds of other people. We are globally connected. And I am absolutely convinced that if such a virus or a pathogen is released again, it doesn't necessarily have to be a virus. That then a network of many, possibly more intelligent people than we are, connects and networks to find a solution that can be offered to a broad population so that not everyone panics and gets a genetic construct injected. So I believe we will have solutions then. There is always a solution, and we will somehow find it in the network and be able to spread it. And that is my hope, that we can respond to a physical pandemic with an intellectual pandemic.
Yes, Michael, I would like to briefly add to that. Thank you for bringing it up, the topic of fear. Of course, we need to talk about and inform on this topic, and those who know me know that one of my main statements is do not be afraid. And I can always say it again, die beeinpasst hat sich. Do not be afraid, because, as you just said, we three, many other people are working on this issue. Yes, we have really learned something from the last 4 years. I have really learned how brutally a regime can act. I didn't think it was possible before, and we are offering solutions on it. One solution is, for example, to get informed, to approach the Grand Council here in the canton of Bern, who lives around the corner, and say, tell me, what's actually happening in Spiez? These questions, always asking questions again. And Switzerland is so small, I said that recently too, there's a member of the Grand Council living around every street corner. The cantons are sometimes so large that you say it's actually a small council and not a Grand Council. So there are politicians everywhere that I can approach on the street corner. And that is what one should do. And these are solutions that have nothing to do with malice, but simply asking questions and seeking answers. That alone is enough. Possibly addressing the beginnings so that something like this does not happen again, and to take away people's fear. That is my goal, our goal, and not to frighten them.
Yes, perhaps to add here, I think exactly what we are doing here together is very important. I see it as a tool. A video like this, a conversation, an exchange is exactly what we can use to inform our fellow citizens. Because it is so difficult due to the current censorship, and this will increase, we are having more and more trouble bringing our information to the public and society. And that's why we have already set up several different constructs here with our association platform. But the important thing is that we also provide our fellow people locally and regionally with these tools, these instruments like such a video, an educational video, so they can truly use it, truly discover their entire network. And so the next time they try to drive us into panic and fear, people will be informed. And I do think that we have a very, very big chance to practice civil disobedience along with this enlightenment and really put these politicians in the spotlight. What they are planning here in Switzerland, newly in the canton of St. Gallen, is to try to make changes to the epidemic law so that we have to pay up to 20,000 francs. A citizen, if they do not accept the vaccination in the next round, so they are doing it here through the wallet in Switzerland, Zurich is discussing, I think, up to 50,000 fine if you simply do not accept the shot or the injection. So here it's about coercing and blackmailing you again to make you participate. And now we really all need to take action against this thing with consultations and so on. What an incredible mess has happened there. So it's up to us to uncover this financial opacity from the cantons, the federal government, but especially the WHO, these conflicts of interest, and above all, this personal economy. And I will give everything. I have already said publicly, I would even give my life for this. I am going full throttle now, even if I am really being attacked. A letter together with Stefan Hockertz to Donald Trump, reaching out to the USA to get help so that we can now bring a mega wave from abroad to our parliament, to the Swiss government. This will trigger an effect worldwide. And here in Switzerland, we host these NGOs. These are mostly corrupt, even criminal organizations. The Dr. Meryl Nehls said it that way too. What the WHO is allowing is criminal, and from my point of view, it is also highly criminal that our government is participating in it. And if we do nothing, it is really our own fault. I truly wish all people absolute total courage, lots of energy, and simply, yes, strength to implement what we are discussing here together. Have courage. Do not be fearful. Do not panic. Just stand firm. We have the facts and the entire factual basis. It's all with us. We don't need to be afraid here. And with that, yes, I think we have a very, very good chance to reach the turning point here.
And I believe it's important that we can't just exert pressure from the USA. So I wish you great success, that it works. I hope that I can also contribute to that. I also have a US tournament coming up, but I think we can also exert pressure from within, that is from the sovereign. And that means that everyone who has watched the video up to this point might forward it to their friends, acquaintances, and above all, I hope that some other broadcasters, that is other channels, mine is not that big yet, but there are very large channels in Germany, Switzerland, Austria, that they take up the topic and also promote it. In this way, we could very quickly reach several tens of millions of people. And that would be important because I believe we simply need to raise more, in English, you say awareness, so create more awareness about what is happening here, that you cannot be governed by fear, because honestly, those who know something don't have to believe it, and that is important.
Yes, once again, thank you for the opportunity to discuss this here. We will keep you updated, certainly through the association. It has established a broad foundation. What's next? Yes, I have a good idea. So back here on the pasture, there's a big space where a helicopter can land. Donald, if you feel like it, come by here, then we can talk about the story in person. From Davos to here, it's not far by helicopter. That's maybe a maximum of 20 minutes. And then we can have a nice conversation about the topic. Thank you.
Yes, great. Then let's hope that Donald Trump comes and has a conversation. If not, then I will soon go to the USA and personally seek him out and look for a conversation with him. We'll see. So, many thanks to both of you for having the courage to not do nothing. And yes, we will stay on the channel, definitely on my channel when we report. If anything happens, get in touch and we will continue to inform everyone here. Thank you very, very much to you.